Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington, where the Trump administration is navigating multiple political headwinds on the Epstein files, the economy, and now a major setback into the prosecution of one of the president's perceived political enemies after the Justice Department acknowledged today in court that it did not follow proper protocol when indicting former FBI Director James Comey. A stunning admission. We will have much more on that in just a moment, but we do begin at the White House, where after months of debate and delay, and despite the president's initial objections, a measure to compel the release of the Epstein files is about to be signed into law. The bill, which passed in near unanimous fashion through Congress, gives the Justice Department 30 days to release the files. Survivors of Epstein's abuse cheering and hugging when the news was announced.
The Senate has passed the bill under unanimous consent.
The president has pledged to sign the bill, even as he continues to lash for the issue, arguing it's a Democratic hoax to distract from his achievements. The president's handling of the issue has frustrated some notable figures in his fiercely loyal base. At a moment when some of his allies in Congress are also voicing frustrations with his approach to core economic issues like affordability and jobs. Today, the president brushing aside criticisms about comments he made favoring highly skilled foreign workers over American workers for certain jobs.
I love my conservative friends. I love MAGA, but this is MAGA. And those people are going to teach our people how to make computer chips. And in a short period of time, our people are going to be doing great, and those people can go home where they probably always want to be. They're unbelievable patriots, but they just don't understand. Our people have to be taught.
The president today also dismissing concerns around affordability issues, which fueled big wins for Democrats in this month's elections.
We're also making incredible strides to make America affordable again. That's a new word that they're using. Affordability, they talk. They had the worst inflation in history. They had the highest prices in history. The country was going to hell. The only thing that we're going up in is our stock market, okay? The only price that we really have. I mean, we're bringing prices down.
It comes as a new NPR PBS Marist poll shows voters believe the administration's top priority should be lowering prices. No other issue even comes remotely close. That same poll found the president's approval rating declining, with 57% now disapproving of the job he's doing, and voters favoring electing Democrats to Congress in next year's midterms by a whopping 14-point margin. Joining me now from the White House is NBC's Monica Alba, and Julie Tsirkin is on Capitol Hill to start us off. Thanks to both of you. Monica, let me start with you. When do we expect President Trump will sign that Epstein bill into law?
That is the question of the hour, of the day, Kristen, and we frankly do not know. As of just moments ago when we checked, the president hadn't yet signed the bill. And remember that this is the kind of thing that he can do privately, he can do it quickly, he can do it out of the view of cameras, or he could decide to do it in front of cameras, as we have seen time and time again with other kinds of legislation. But it's unclear, and the White House hasn't indicated yet which way this is going to go in terms of how we're going to learn about it. But a senior White House official did indicate, and the president himself a few days ago, that the president does plan to sign it. So we'll see about the logistics of how that takes place. But I do think that, as we saw just in the last week or so, when the president wants to sign something quickly, he does. And when he reopened the government, for instance, once all of the details on Capitol Hill were wrapped up and the bill was actually transmitted to him, it was done in fairly quick order. So today they are still working on that. We will see. But we know, again, he does intend at some point to sign it. And then that does give the 30-day kickoff to the Department of Justice to do what they need to do on their end before we might see any of this information.
So, Monica, let's talk about those 30 days. Could this be a resolution or a potential delay tactic, those 30 days? What are you going to be watching for?
There are so many questions we have about exactly what's in the files. You know, there had been such a continued push to release the files. But what does that actually mean? Well, now perhaps we get to find out. And of course, like with anything related to sensitive information, there may have to be some redactions. There may have to be some information withheld if it is connected to, as many of the victims have pointed out, things that have to do with, of course, any identifying details that they would not want out there. But then also, Kristen, there's this question of the quote, active investigation that the president launched his own Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to initiate, which could also be an obstacle to some of the release of this information, because they could potentially say that that is a reason for not doing it. At the same time, remember that earlier this year, the DOJ had assessed that there wasn't credible evidence, but just today, the Attorney General notably saying that she did believe there was some, quote, new information, but she didn't share more details about what that could lead to, what impact that might have on this crucial release that really the victims, the survivors, have been pushing for and cheering and are celebrating. But again, the real question is what might be in there and when might we actually see it? That is still a huge target for us.
No, you're absolutely right, Monica, and the reaction from the survivors, incredibly emotional indeed. Julie, let me turn to you on Capitol Hill, because even though the bill has passed, there are some new tensions emerging. House Speaker Mike Johnson had said he wanted to see changes to the legislation once it reached the Senate. That did not happen. It passed without any changes. Talk about the tensions that Speaker Johnson is airing at his counterpart.
Yeah, this is super interesting, Kristen. We've kind of picked up on this over the last couple of weeks. It wasn't just the Epstein issue, which we'll talk about in a moment, but it was before that a provision that allowed senators to sue retroactively because of the January 6th probe. That provision caught Speaker Johnson completely off guard. Today, actually, the House is going to vote to repeal it, and he and Thune are still at complete odds. When you talk about the Epstein matter, that's yet another thing. Speaker Johnson had a lengthy press conference yesterday morning in which he said, he started it off saying that he spoke to John Thune, the Republican leader in the Senate, about making amendments to the House-passed bill, the bill they were poised to pass in a couple of hours from then. Johnson took issue with the fact in his mind that the bill does not give adequate protections to the Epstein survivors that Monica was just referring to that may not want to be named. And John Thune came out after that saying, look, I looked at this with my counsel. There's nothing in there that we have to change, talking about the overwhelming vote that came out of the House. And then, of course, he let, as well as the other 99 members, an effort from Leader Schumer just pass on the floor. Johnson seeming a little bit irritated about that last night.
Some really fascinating dynamics that we'll continue to track. Let me ask you, broadly speaking, about the Trump base, because we started to see some fractures. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, who President Trump started to call a traitor because she was demanding the release of these Epstein files, among other things. He, of course, changed his position, started to say, yes, he would sign this bill into law, but he doesn't want it to distract from his overall agenda. But do you think the cracks that we saw in the base could be long-term, Julie? What are your sources telling you?
Yeah, I'll pick up where you left off there, because Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman from Georgia, said something really interesting yesterday at a press conference with survivors before the vote took place. She said something to the effect of, Mr. President, you called me a traitor, but the real traitor is an American that puts foreign governments over the American people. And I thought that could mean a whole host of issues. It could, of course, mean the tensions we've seen in the MAGA base when it comes to the way the president has approached the issue of Israel and the Middle East, starting new wars overseas. Is something we've heard over and over again, but also as it relates to H-1B visas, the temporary visas given to immigrants who come here to work essentially, but are not permanently residing here or looking for that kind of status. The president at total odds with his MAGA base on that issue. He defended it again today, saying that people here need in certain areas, and also on the issue of Affordable Care Act. So I think this is just beginning and is something we'll continue to follow.
All right, Monica and Julie, thank you so much for starting us off on a very busy news day. We really appreciate it. As we mentioned, we are also following breaking news in the Justice Department's case against former FBI Director James Comey, which now appears to be in serious jeopardy after today in court it was revealed that prosecutors did not follow proper protocol when indicting Comey. Interim U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan and her team acknowledging that the Jury never reviewed the final indictment against Comey. It is a major error that could get the case thrown out, according to legal experts. Additionally, federal prosecutors also conceding that they were under orders from the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche's office not to disclose whether career prosecutors have previously written a memo recommending no charges be brought against Comey. The two admissions coming during a hearing in which Comey's attorney urged the judge to dismiss the case, calling it, quote, selective and vindictive, while accusing the president of weaponizing the Justice Department in an attempt to silence a perceived political enemy. The Justice Department responded to those allegations, telling the judge that Comey was indicted because he lied to Congress. Comey has denied those allegations. NBC News legal affairs reporter Gary Grumbach joins me now, along with Cobb, who served as a White House attorney during the first Trump administration and is also a former federal prosecutor. Thanks to both of you for being here. I will talk to you in 1 minute. Let me start with you, though, Gary. Set the scene here. Just how stunning is it that today in court you had this admission that the grand jury never saw the final charging papers?
Yeah, stunning, shocking, choose your adjective.
Yes.
Here. It really was. Let me walk you through exactly what the DOJ say happened in that grand jury room. They were presented with 3 charges. They indicted on 2 of them. One of them, it's called a no bill. They did not indict. So a grand jury coordinator, according to the Department of Justice, went and edited the document to take out that first count that was not indicted. They then took that 2 counts indictments. The foreperson of the grand jury signed it. Lindsay Halligan, the U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, signed it, and they presented it to the judge. The entire grand jury never saw that operative document, and that is a huge issue in this case.
Well, and it's one that clearly is what is at the center, is putting this case potentially in serious jeopardy. This other admission, prosecutors acknowledging that Todd Blanche's office, the Deputy Attorney General, instructed them not to reveal whether career prosecutors had effectively written a memo recommending that no charges be brought against James Comey. What's the significance there?
You know, so often we've seen Department of Justice attorneys go forward into a court and say they don't know, they were not given this information. This attorney came forward today and said, actually, I was told not to say this information. And he said he was told by the Deputy Attorney General, that's Todd Blanche's office. And that's a very significant admission here, because clearly this judge wants this information, whether or not there was a declination memo. NBC News has reported that there was a declination memo in this case. He would not say whether or not that was the case.
And no decision today by the judge. Where does this go from here? What's the potential timeline for when the judge could make a final decision?
So in James Comey's case alone, there are 3 different decisions that we are waiting on, related to Lindsay Halligan's appointment, related to grand jury material being passed over to the defense, and now relating to this decision from Judge Nachmanoff today. We hope all of this is done by Thanksgiving, but all of it is sure to be appealed.
All right. Well, Gary Grumbach, thank you so much for setting the stage for us. That brings me to Cobb. There's so much to unpack here, but I do want to start with arguably what is the most stunning revelation, that the grand jury never saw the final indictment. Can you put this into context for our viewers? What's the significance and what are the implications?
Well, it's wholly improper. It's really prosecutorial misconduct and wholesale ineptitude. The fact that the grand jury did not receive the 2-count indictment after having rejected the first count in the 3-count indictment, particularly given the fact that we now know from the record that the grand jury asked several aggressive questions of Lindsay Halligan in connection with which she misrepresented the law as to Comey's Fifth Amendment privilege, and also urged them to go ahead and indict because that the government had stronger and better evidence than they had seen that would trial. Gross misconduct on both fronts. But the fact that the grand jury never saw this indictment and only the foreperson approved it it really makes the indictment a nullity. They're really, as Michael Dreeben, who is one of the most skilled advocates in America, he was at the Justice Department for a long time, argued over 100 cases before the Supreme Court. As he pointed out to the judge, this means there really is no indictment, and I think he's legally correct on that.
So technically, there's no indictment based on your understanding. Have you ever seen anything like this before, Ty, in all of your years of practicing law?
Oh, no. I mean, I don't think anybody has. I mean, this is, this is just it's so remarkable that somebody who had been a criminal lawyer for 72 hours went into the grand jury alone. No, it's not surprising that it didn't get handled flawlessly, but it would have been impossible for even experienced prosecutors to effectively navigate the circumstances where the top count of the indictment was rejected by the grand jury, and then create their own indictment and take it to the court. And remember that the deception here by Halligan goes back to that first presentation of the indictment in the court after the grand jury had completed its work. And the judge asked multiple questions about why did he have two indictments, and none of this information was presented to him. So the wholesale attempt to mislead the judiciary on this that came to somewhat of a conclusion today is just shocking and really requires the termination of this case.
So
I was just going to say, and going to your issue about Blanche, Blanche having ordered that the prosecutors deceive the court with regard to the existence of the declination memo, which everybody knew existed. That is just unheard of. Now, we do know that Bove, when he was at the Justice Department, ordered his prosecutors to defy the judges. And now we've got defy and deceive as the marching orders from the top of the Justice Department. That's never been the case in American history. And it just shows you how disgraceful and corrupt this Justice Department is.
So I just want to be very clear about what you are saying, Ty. What do you think the likelihood is, as I have this conversation with you, that this case is going to be thrown out?
Oh, this case is going to be thrown out, and this is only one of the reasons. I mean, it's A, it's a vindictive prosecution. B, Halligan was not legally appointed. And C, the prosecutorial misconduct here is so severe that almost any judge would toss it, with the possible exception of Eileen Cannon in Florida. So I think this case is dead. The government may go down, fighting and gasping, but this case is dead.
Do you think Lindsay Halligan or Todd Blanche could face disciplinary actions based on the revelations today, Ty?
Well, I think Halligan and Bondi for sure could face disciplinary action, because Bondi has twice affirmed the purported legitimacy of Halligan's grand jury presentation before the court, and those affirmations were false. There's no way that any seasoned prosecutor could say this was done according to Hoyle. No way. And Halligan definitely, and Blanche. It's hard to say. That has to be sussed out a little bit. We need a little bit more factual development. I would love to see Blanche, Bondi, and Halligan under oath getting the questioning they deserve from Patrick Fitzgerald, who I think would skewer them.
And just to be very clear, what, if anything, would the disciplinary action look like? Could that mean being disbarred?
Yes, it could be disbarment. It could also be being prohibited from appearing before the Eastern District of Virginia. There are a host of serious sanctions that can and should be imposed.
And the implications, Ty, for the other cases against Letitia James, for example?
So so what happened today is not really relevant to the Letitia James case, other than adding the context of deception and misleading the court. But I think with regard to Letitia James's case, certainly on the vindictive front, she has probably a more compelling argument than Comey does, but each should prevail. And with regard to the appointment issue, they have the identical objection, and I think they'll both succeed on that.
Ty, very quickly before I let you go, on the Jeffrey Epstein case, President Trump expected to sign the bill into law, which will call on the Justice Department to release all of the files related to Jeffrey Epstein in 30 days. Do you anticipate that the Justice Department will comply with that?
Not a chance. No, I mean, the whole scam about, the order from Trump to prosecute Democrats, not Republicans, reopen the case. Bondi has said twice on the record that there are no cases that could be presented. She's purported to have exhaustively reviewed all the evidence and told the world that there will be no further charges because none can be brought. Today she says there's new evidence that would justify her reopening the case. That's amazing in view of the fact that she reopened it 17 minutes after Trump ordered her to do so. I'm not sure how she discovered the evidence that quickly, but I don't believe it happened.
All right. Ty Cobb, as always, we really appreciate your being here and your perspective. Great to see you as always.
Always wonderful to be with you, Kristen.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.